Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at the strange disappearance of Nicholas Barclay, a teenage boy from Texas who went missing in 1994. Nicholas Patrick Barclay was born on the 31st of December 1980. He was the youngest of 3 children that were born to Beverly Dollarhide. She had 2 older children from a previous relationship, a daughter that was named Carrie, or it's possibly Carey, and a son, Jason. Family life was far from stable. Beverly had battled with heroin addiction. Jason had a violent temper and a cocaine addiction. And Nicholas was known to be a troublesome child. He barely attended school, and when he did, he would usually be a disruption. He was a violent child who had on numerous occasions threatened his teachers and even his own mother. He also had a juvenile criminal record after breaking into a convenience store in his town, and at the time of his disappearance, he was awaiting a sentencing hearing after being caught shoplifting a pair of trainers. The family were well known to the authorities, with the police spending a lot of time at the family home due to domestic disturbances, or also when Nicholas would disappear for periods of time. On June the 13th, 1994, 13-year-old Nicholas met with his friends in a park close to his home to play basketball. It was just before sunset that Nicholas and his friends decided to call it a day and head home. Tired from the game, Nicholas called home to ask his mother if she would come and collect him in the car. The phone was answered by Nicholas's older brother, Jason. Jason explained that their mother, who worked the night shift, was asleep and he refused to wake her, telling Nicholas to walk home instead. That phone call was the last time that anyone heard from Nicholas. He never returned home that evening. While his mother, Beverly, was angry at Nicholas for staying out all night, the thought that he might be in danger did not cross her mind. This wasn't the first time that he had failed to come home. Because of this, the family did not contact the police straight away, and when they did so, his disappearance was not treated with any particular urgency. The police initially believed that Nicholas had run away from home, and this theory was supported by the fact that his sentencing hearing was due to take place the day after he vanished. It was a strong possibility that at this hearing, Nicholas would be taken away from his family and moved to a group home for troubled boys. This was something that Nicholas was strongly against. At the time of his disappearance, Nicholas only had about $5 of cash on him, and he had no spare clothes or supplies. The police filed a missing persons report and conducted a search, but they found no leads and were unable to trace Nicholas's steps the night of his disappearance. Eventually, the search went cold. Some 3 months later, on September the 25th, 1994, Nicholas's brother Jason called the police after seeing a young boy trying to break into the family's garage. After spotting Jason at an upstairs window, the boy fled before anyone could catch up with him. Jason was convinced that the child was his younger brother Nicholas, but the police were not. Again, a search was conducted, but no trace of the boy was found. It would be another 3 years and 4 months before there were any more potential sightings or contact from Nicholas. In October 1997, the police officials in the US received a phone call from the Spanish authorities. They said that they had found Nicholas. Nicholas had said that he had been kidnapped and held captive in Europe. Nicholas's family were contacted, and his sister, Carrie, caught the next flight to Spain to identify her younger brother and bring him home. Carrie met with the man believed to be her brother and confirmed that it was him. They sat down and spoke for a while, reminiscing about home, their family, and Nicholas's childhood. However, Carrie found it a little bit odd that his memory was a little vague. but acknowledging that he had gone through an extremely traumatic experience, she did not feel any cause for concern over these memory lapses. Once Carrie identified the man as her brother, the local authorities conducted a test to check that he was who he claimed to be. They showed him a series of family photographs and quizzed him about them. The man answered 9 out of the 10 questions correctly, at which point the authorities released him and allowed him to return home. Carrie and Nicholas eventually boarded a flight back to the US and were greeted by the rest of the family at the airport. Whilst this sounds like the happy ending to the story, not everything was as it seemed. Whilst Nicholas's mother and sister believed this man was Nicholas, many other people were suspicious. This man seemed particularly quiet, not at all like many remembered him. Also, this man had dark hair which had been bleached blonde, and brown eyes, which Nicholas had lighter, almost blonde hair and blue eyes. A fact the man explained away, stating that his hair and eyes had been chemically changed by his captives in an attempt to conceal his true identity. The man also spoke with a French accent and used phrases that were considered to be very European. He claimed that he had picked up these sayings whilst being held captive, which was initially in France. To many, it was painfully apparent that this man was not Nicholas, despite the family being adamant that he was. The authorities requested a blood sample and fingerprints in order to confirm his identity, but he refused to voluntarily give either of these. It didn't take long for the story to be picked up by local and national news. The profile of the story sparked the interest of many private investigators. One private investigator who was local to the area grew ever suspicious while he was working with a TV crew that had been filming the family. The investigator compared photos of the man's ears to some taken 3 years earlier and found that they were completely different. This information made its way to the FBI, and in February 1998, they got a court order to take the man's fingerprints and blood to determine if they were a match with Nicholas. These tests confirmed that this man was not who he claimed to be. He wasn't Nicholas Barclay, but was in fact Frédéric Pierre Bourdin, a 23-year-old French serial imposter who was also known as the Chameleon. After Frédéric was exposed, he made several contradicting statements about Nicholas. He claimed he had known Nicholas in Spain and that the boy was alive. He claimed he had proof that Nicholas was dead and later denied ever having met Nicholas at all and stated that he knew nothing about the case. When his case went to trial, Frédéric pleaded guilty to passport fraud and falsely impersonating Nicholas Barclay and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. In 2003, he was released from prison and deported back to France. Shortly after this, he assumed the identity of Léo Bally, a 21-year-old Frenchman who went missing in 1996 as a teenager. Once again, DNA testing proved he wasn't who he claimed to be, and Frédéric's life went on like this for many years that followed. Whilst Frédéric had been identified as the man impersonating Nicholas, the mystery of Nicholas's disappearance remained unsolved. The public and the authorities began questioning the Barclay family. Why did Nicholas's mother and siblings adamantly claim that Pierre was Nicholas, despite it clearly being a different person? And how was Pierre so familiar with the Barclay family? He knew enough information about the family to pass the test administered by the Spanish authorities, allowing him to board the flight to the US. Some believe that the Barclay family played along with the story of Frédéric being Nicholas as a way of covering up the truth. During his trial, Frédéric claimed that Jason knew that he wasn't really Nicholas because Jason had killed his brother, with Frédéric stating that it was clear that Jason knew what had happened to Nicholas. Some thought that Nicholas's sister, Carrie, fed Frédéric information about the family when she originally met with him in Spain and questioned if the Barclay family saw the perfect opportunity present itself to them when Frédéric claimed to be Nicholas. However, others believed in the family's innocence. Grief, heartbreak and denial are all powerful forces. Did the family so desperately want to believe that Nicholas had been found that they convinced themselves that he had and overlooked the evidence to the contrary? During the police investigation of the Barclay family, They questioned Jason about his brother's disappearance and, according to reports, Jason just stared at the interrogating officer without offering a defence. Just a few days later, Jason was found dead at his home. He had died from a drug overdose. Jason's death shocked many, and some considered this as an indication of his guilt. Although whether this was the guilt that he lived with at being the one who told Nicholas to walk home on the night that he disappeared, or guilt because he was in some way involved in his brother's disappearance, we will never know. There's never been any evidence to support the claim that the family had anything to do with Nicholas's disappearance, and the investigation was eventually dropped. Nicholas has never been found, and his disappearance remains unsolved. He would now be 43 years old and missing for almost 3 decades. That concludes today's story. Please subscribe to the channel or click like to help me. Quick time now for a petty crime. We have Rico, who is a cross between a coonhound and a German shepherd. He's a rescue dog that when he likes you, he actually adores you. 77 pounds or 35 kilos of cuddle monster that loves his treats. And a while back we featured a corgi called Jack from San Francisco. There was also 2 cats, Smokey and Midnight. Smokey's petty crime was to steal Dad David's meal. And here is Midnight in a box, possibly using it as a litter tray, who knows. Thanks very much for listening to the Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst, some of you may already be aware of this, but Netflix covered this case called The Imposter. Goodbye.